On November 30th, 2021, yet another school shooting would occur in America. It left 4 people dead and 8 injured. The shooter was 15-year-old Ethan Crumbley, who surrendered after the massacre and was arrested by the school's resource officer. He was afterwards taken to the Oxford police station and then later booked into the Oakland County Children's Village, which is the county's juvenile detention center. Without the shooter's presence, the school was cleared and students were sent home for the next few weeks. The school was remodeled and the hallways changed. The students would then go back to school, but many parents were astonished and never sent their kids back to this school. The 8 injured ones were taken to Oxford's My Health Urgent Care Clinic and treated there. They would later be released to continue recovering at their homes. The funerals for the 4 deceased ones were held in different places. One at the Kensington Church in Lake Orion, another at the Boulder Point Golf Club in Oxford, another at Oxford's Lake Point Community Church, and another at the Moddit's Funeral Home in Orion. There were no reports of the shooter having been bullied. However, there were reports of odd behavior from him, such as writing depressing notes on his math schoolwork, disturbing text messages stating delusions he was having, and looking up ammunition in class. The shooter, Ethan Crumbley, as well texted his mom when he was home alone that he believed there was a demon in their house. Ethan's grades had dropped, and he had been falling asleep in class more often, which meant he wasn't sleeping as much at night like he was supposed to. Now let's go over how Ethan got a gun to shoot up his school. His father got it for him as an early Christmas present. Ethan would brag about the gun on Instagram, calling it his baby. There was as well content in his mother's social media, showing that they were at a shooting range, and she stated that it was a mother and son moment. Ethan's school principal called his parents and informed them that they had caught him writing depressing messages and making drawings related to gun violence. The parents were asked to meet the school administration at the school for a meeting. Once the parents got to the school, they were asked to take Ethan home. However, they refused to do so because they had to get back to work. Father James was a DoorDasher and Mother Jennifer a marketer. Both parents did not greet Ethan at the start of the meeting. Jennifer left and returned to work. James as well left, but stopped and told Ethan to express his thoughts to his teachers or write them in his journal. The school's counselor did not check Ethan's book bag. Inside that book bag was the handgun that his dad had given him for Christmas. Ethan then went to the bathroom, loaded his gun, and started shooting. As the Michigan Bureau of Investigation, known as MBI, investigated the shooting, the details regarding the unfolding of the shooting were brought to light. Several lawsuits were filed against the school district and its officials. There was a lawsuit filed against the parents and the Michigan State Police. These cases were heard in both civil and federal courts. However, they were all dismissed by judges and appeals courts. On the other hand, there were only 2 cases that did not get dismissed. They were crime cases. The Oakland County District Attorney Karen McDonald vowed to prosecute both of these cases. She charged the shooter, Ethan Crumbley, with 24 felony crimes. The day after the shooting, Ethan showed up virtually via Zoom before Magistrate Judge Nancy Karniak. She read the charges against him and ordered him to be held in custody without bail. In this hearing, Prosecutor Karen McDonald announced that she would try him as an adult. The charges against him were 1 count of terrorism causing death, 4 counts of first-degree murder, 7 counts of assault with intent to murder, and 12 counts of possession of a firearm during the commission of a felony. After this hearing, Ethan was moved to another facility, the Oakland County Jail. Prosecutor McDonald then held a press conference outside her office, announcing more charges, this time against the parents of the shooter. She explained that the parents allowed Ethan to be in possession of that gun, which was identified as a 9mm SIG Sawyer SP 2022 semi-automatic handgun, and they ignored all mental health complaints regarding their son, leading to the school shooting occurring. Each parent was charged with 4 counts of involuntary manslaughter. They were ordered to turn themselves into the jail that afternoon, the same one where Ethan was being held. However, they never did, and a manhunt to capture them started. They had fled to Detroit and were hiding inside an abandoned building with just an art gallery inside it. The owner of the gallery was their friend. They had withdrawn thousands of dollars from their bank account and Ethan's bank account, and as well had hired 2 lawyers. It was hard to track the parents because they had turned their phones off. On December 4th of that year, a civilian witnessed the parents outside of the building smoking. The civilian recognized them after checking the news on his phone and called the cops. The police showed up to the building and searched it. They found the parents hiding and arrested them. They were then taken to the Detroit police station for processing and were later booked into the Oakland County Jail where their son was being held. The parents were later arraigned and pleaded not guilty to the charges. The judge on duty that day, Julie Nichols, set their bail to $500,000. This was done on purpose so they wouldn't be able to leave jail and flee the area again. Weeks later, Ethan was arraigned as well and also pleaded not guilty. District Judge Kwame Rowe confirmed that he would continue to be held in jail without bond while awaiting his trial. Meanwhile, his parents requested a hearing to have a bond amount that they could afford in order for them to be released from jail and not have to await trial behind bars. This hearing was done days later, but their request was denied. They made a second request, and it once again got rejected. The parents' defense argument was that they didn't ever expect Ethan to be so insane, and they never thought he would become a school shooter. On the other hand, Ethan's defense attorney, Paulette Lofton, sought to have him plead insanity in order to try to have a jury find him insane and not guilty. This meant he could have been sent to a mental institution for several years and be released one day, instead of going to prison and spending the rest of his life there. A motion was filed requesting this, and the option to plead insanity was granted to him. Attorney Lofton then filed pleas of not guilty by reason of insanity on Ethan's behalf. This was because Ethan had been psychiatrically evaluated in jail, which led to him being diagnosed with major depressive disorder and psychosis. As well, several attempts were made to have Ethan moved back to a juvenile facility in order for him to not be isolated and continue his schooling. However, his transfer was denied, but he did have access to his school classes via Zoom, which is how he educated himself while in jail. In October 2022, Ethan's defense counsel chose to no longer move forward with the insanity claim. They had him plead guilty to all charges. This meant that there would be no trial for him. However, there would be a set of hearings called Miller hearings to decide whether he should spend the rest of his life in prison or be granted parole, at least to be released one day in the future. 2 more lawyers were then called to represent Ethan Crumbley. They were attorneys Jacqueline Overy and Allison Swain. The Miller hearing was held throughout the next months. Then Judge Rowe came to a conclusion and declared that Ethan would still face spending the rest of his life in prison no matter how old he was during the shooting. On December 8, 2023, Ethan was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole and was given hundreds of additional years for the charges of attempted murder. The penalties for all of the charges would be run consecutively. The following day, he was transferred to the state prison in Lapeer, Michigan, which is known as the Thumb Correctional Facility. Then, when he turned 18, he was switched over to the Oaks Correctional Facility in Manistee, Michigan, where he is currently serving his sentence. After the sentencing of Ethan Crumbley, the criminal cases of his parents continued. They refused to take any plea deals and asked to go to trial. However, they asked to be tried separately. These separate trials were granted to them. Mother Jennifer would be tried first. She would be represented by attorney Shannon Smith, and Father James would be represented by attorney Mariel Lehman. In February 2024, Mother Jennifer was put on trial. After the testimony of many witnesses, she testified on her behalf. Then there were closing arguments and jury deliberations. The first day of deliberations, the jury left early and would continue discussing the verdict the next day. The following day came, and Jennifer was found guilty of all 4 charges just before lunchtime. She would then appeal her case. Father James was tried a month later, after several witnesses testified in his trial. Defense attorney Mariel Lehman delivered a shocking closing argument. She blamed the foul parenting of his son Ethan on his wife Jennifer. James chose not to testify because attorney Lehman explained to him that he said enough in the police interrogation video that was played in court, and that there was no need to make a testimony. It took several days for the jury to deliberate a verdict. They would continue deliberations late at night. Then, on the evening of March 14th, they found him guilty on the 4 charges of involuntary manslaughter. The following month, on April 9th, the parents were each sentenced to 15 years in prison. They will both be eligible for parole after completing 10 years of that sentence. Days after the sentencing, Mother Jennifer was placed in the Huron Valley Correctional Facility in Pittsfield Township, Michigan, where she is currently serving her sentence, and Father James Crumbley in the Charles Egler Reception and Guidance Center in the Black Charter Township in Michigan. After being evaluated, James was transferred to his current correctional facility, the prison in Ayana, Michigan, known as Bellamy Creek. James and Ethan as well appealed their cases. The parents are seeking a new trial or to be freed by a higher court, and Ethan is seeking to have his sentence reduced in order to be released one day. The appeals are currently pending. However, there is an update in one of the appeals for the shooter's mother, Jennifer Crumbley. She requested to be released from prison for the time being while she awaited a decision on her new trial. However, this request was rejected and she will not be freed anytime soon. The judge in her case as well rejected her appeal. Therefore, it will next go to Michigan Supreme Court, then maybe even the Innocence Project or U.S. Supreme Court. All matters regarding the other appeals of Ethan and James remain pending. Thank you for listening, and please share this podcast to someone you know who may be interested in true crime. Don't forget to follow the podcast, and like this episode for more content. Till next time, goodbye.